so much. So I'm Meghan Anzelc, and then Christina's on the line as well. She'll be sharing the presentation with me. And we're really excited to be here with you today. So we're going to be sharing our experiences building a computing environment for our analytics team at Stuart, including some of the lessons learned and some aspects about computing environments you may want to consider for your own situation. So a bit about us and the firm that we work for. So Stuart is an executive search and leadership advisory firm. So the executive search side is effectively operating as recruiters or headhunters for very senior C-level roles. We operate globally across a range of industries and functions and provide a diverse set of product offerings to clients. The data and analytics function that Christina and I belong to was started in 2018, so it didn't exist at the organization prior to that. And it was started with the goal to focus on both how to improve the experiences for our clients and candidates, as well as to help our colleagues in their day-to-day work. So Christina and I both have worked on analytics teams at other organizations, and we came to Stuart with what we had learned previously. This helped to shape a lot of what we saw as must-haves for an analytics computing environment. We knew we wanted to have a central place to store data and do our analytics work where code could be shared across the team. And we knew we'd need to utilize data inputs that align to what the organization viewed as their source of truth. And then given that Stuart operates globally, we also needed to prepare both for having a distributed analytics team and for adjusting our analyses to meet needs of different regions and countries that the firm operates in. So among the considerations for a computing environment, we needed to think about what data we had and wanted to use for analytics. Here on this slide, we've divided into categories of both internal and external data and structured and unstructured data sources. Given the nature of our business, so within the HR space and within the talent acquisition space, we have both structured internal data on clients and candidates, as well as unstructured data such as resumes and other documents. And then on the external side, LinkedIn is probably an obvious source, something that comes to mind. And we've also shown some illustrative examples of other organizations that may provide useful data. And then external data feeds often include both structured and unstructured data, which can come in the form of text or images or other kinds of information. So we knew that we'd want to utilize our internal data sources and then also utilize external data sources where we could. We needed to consider whether the data was already available at Stuart or if it needed to be processed, as in the case of some document types. So if it only existed in document form, we probably needed to do some pre-processing in order to make it usable data for analytics. And then on the external side, for external data, we needed to think about what data feeds the organization was already receiving, and then what external data sources we wanted to add that would be valuable for our analysis, and then plan timeframes and allocate budget accordingly. So taking into account the procurement process and how much different external data feeds might cost us. And then both Christina and I also knew from past experiences that sometimes corporate data systems can look something like this, right? They're very messy. There's a lot of complication, a lot of sort of Band-Aid solutions. And oftentimes within corporate data systems, you have a combination of legacy systems and then bolt-on systems, either from acquisitions or new products that have been launched. And I'm sure everybody's familiar with systems that have been stretched beyond their original design to serve a bigger set of needs and purposes. So for our computing environment, we knew we'd need to determine the source systems that house the data we wanted, and then to find ways to extract data from them and bring it into an area that we could access to do our work on the analysis side. And then also from our past experiences, where both Christina and I have worked in highly regulated industries, we also wanted to make sure we were aware of any regulations we need to follow for the data that we used or for the analyses that we conducted. And so in the HR space, this includes things like privacy regulations, which includes the familiar GDPR in the EU and the California Privacy Act in the United States, as well as other regulations that are actually specific to hiring practices, such as EEOC regulations in the United States. And so the whole regulatory environment around hiring and employment and recruitment is an area that has seen a lot of new regulations proposed. So we wanted to make sure that our computing environment would be set up such that it would be easier for us to document data lineage, so that if we needed to provide information to regulatory agencies or trace back what we were doing, we could do that relatively easily. So the data lineage piece being important. And then also so that our computing environment was set up so that we can make any adjustments that we might need to as new regulations come into play in this space. So for the next few slides, I'll turn it over to Christina.
Thanks, Megan. So some considerations for people analytics. As a new analytics function, we spend a lot of time understanding the landscape of technologies and vendors in the HRTech space. This visual from Talent Tech Labs illustrates just some of the hundreds of companies which provide solutions related to talent acquisition. In our discussions with senior leadership, we are often asked about the trade-offs between building our own in-house solution, partnering with vendors, or even the potential to buy solutions to fit our needs. So when we were thinking about our computing environment, we needed the flexibility to be able to work with build, partner, or buy solutions, discussing architecture and secure information security with our colleagues, so that we would be able to support any solutions that would fit our business. To define what we needed in our computing environment, we first considered our analytics strategy and the expected scope of work we would need to do in the first few years. We also considered any data architecture decisions that were made. For example, the cloud provider or the data lake structure. In addition, the capacity and skill set of key teams in our IT organization, especially the architecture and the information security teams. And of course, we needed to consider our budget, how much we wanted to invest and over what time periods. We knew we needed some must-haves based on the work experience that Megan and I have had at other organizations. Like Megan said, we knew that we wanted a central place to have our input and output analysis data. We needed a central place to write code and execute our analysis that will be visible to all team members across the globe. We also knew that we wanted to have a code versioning system such as Git. And we wanted our environment to be scaled to meet our current and future needs, to be able to support the types of data, the volume of data, and the type of analysis we would like to run. So at the beginning of our journey, we had to educate colleagues on analytics, why we need old data, why we need frozen data, why sometimes for our projects we cannot use anonymized data. We needed to have discussions around the way we work, lots of iterations, trial and error, and that we don't always write performance optimized code to run in production, at least not the very beginning. We needed to socialize with senior leadership for support. Computing environments are all back-end and they're not flashy, but they're so necessary for our work. We needed to have discussions about data, different sources of data, where we can access, how we can access them seamlessly, and then controlling our environment, restricting the access within teams and across teams. What worked well for us were attending client events and training sessions, especially the events that were conducted by clients of the cloud provider, and one-on-one training sessions with the cloud provider themselves. Engaging or hiring data architects into the data science team, especially architects that had prior experience working with data science teams and understanding the way we work, accelerated our build time. So where are we today? We are now at a point in our journey where we have key components built out. Access to different sources of data, both internally and externally, and restrictions around the data. With these key components, we can evaluate in-house and cloud-provided capabilities a lot faster. So what have we learned so far? Building a computing environment for a new analytics function from scratch requires a lot of patience and dedication to push forward. We found it critical to build relationships with key IT colleagues and have recurrent touch points with them so we can continue discussions on the distinction between short-term and long-term optimization, cost optimizations. And to understand, get them to have an understanding of our work and us to understand their ways of working. While building a computing environment, we started with what's necessary and then expanded to meet vision. While this may seem obvious, one can easily get wrapped up with spending a lot of time and resources in setting up services that promise to deliver but fail to. Recommendations and lessons learned. What we wish we had known when we started. So we think that we should have dedicated more time and effort in setting up a cloud-enabled sandbox environment, especially since we have strict guidance over using non-personal identifiable information in the sandbox environment. So the setup and the data prep was challenging. Engaging data architects, especially those who haven't worked with data science teams in a prototype project, would have enabled to move our projects a lot faster. And then championing for control over our computing environment, over certain dimensions like scalability, being able to start or jobs and stop jobs, being able to increase or decrease CPUs so that we're not so dependent on IT for day-to-day things. So some considerations for when you're setting up your cloud computing environment. Different aspects of your data, different systems, and different regulations for your industry. The various teams you need to engage with within your company. For example, legal, information security, architecture, and software development teams. The size of your IT team and the maturity of both the IT team and your data science team. The investment towards your computing environment and over what time frame. And last but not least, your scope and your analytics roadmap can look different across companies, but it is one of the most important starting points for building out your computing environment. So I hope this discussion has been helpful to provide some insights and tips when you build your computing environment or potentially to even enhance it. Thank you so much for joining us today.